So thank you everybody for coming here today. Again, I want to thank the OMB staff and the county staff in general for getting through this budget. I don't think anybody realizes how many times we go back and forth trying to make things fit. This is not something where you just look at a set of numbers and you just crunch them into a form, then you're done. In order to balance everything, every time there's a put or a take, if there's something new that comes up and we have to address it, unless you think you've got unlimited ability, then it winds up meaning you have to make other adjustments someplace else. So I want to thank my staff for an amazing job in getting this done. I also want to acknowledge that it was 4 years ago that we did this, and then we stopped because we were interrupted by COVID, and we skipped the rest of the meeting. And I'm just hoping that today's little banking kerfluffle is not, this year's version of COVID. So hopefully this does not wind up to be bigger than it is. Jenny, Brian, thank you so much for everything. And Rich, thank you for your patience. You certainly needed patience going through this, so I really greatly appreciate it. I want to appreciate all our labor partners, mine and also the school systems, in trying to get to a place that's workable. This is truly a world where not everybody gets everything they ask for or want, and everybody, I think, did a reasonable job of moving us forward. So I want to talk about what we're doing today. I'm going to start with just to refresh people of what the key investments are in this budget. Montgomery County's made a lot of progress over the last number of years. We've made major investments in the climate that we weren't making before. We made major investments in early childhood education that we weren't making before. We have a racial equity group that actually analyzes both capital and operating budgets that wasn't being done before. We've taken the police department through a major review of police practices and looking to implement things that will change the way we train our police officers going forward. We've just done a lot of really important things. And it's one of the things that I wanted, in terms of how I looked at this budget, when we were faced with the schools ask, which we'll talk about in a little bit, there was no way it made sense to retreat on everything else we'd done in order to do that. Were we going to dismantle our school spending, or dismantle our rent subsidies, or dismantle the food that people need? In order to do that, we didn't do that. And so when you look at this list of things, we are, providing funding for the public schools. We fully funded Montgomery College's request. We've got record funding, again, for climate change, and a lot of that money goes toward implementation. So we had a plan. We started putting things in place. Now we're providing the support. So if you're in the private sector, there's somebody to go to and say, I want to electrify my building. How do I do that? If you want to buy an electric car, we're putting together an electric car buying co-op. So all those things are areas where we're able to make, I think, some pretty significant progress. We made extra funding, additional funding in economic development and in workforce. And I'd say, when I came in, the WorkSource Montgomery County was an embarrassment to Montgomery County. And today I can say WorkSource Montgomery County is one of the things to be proudest of in Montgomery County. And I don't know if Anthony Featherstone's here. We should all applaud him in his absence, even if he's not. Because that was an area where we knew we weren't getting done what we needed to do, and he stepped up, and with the new leadership there and new board, we've taken it to a different place. This budget proposes refunding, again, the Office of the People's Council. This is a huge issue in the communities as people deal with zoning changes and everything. The council and the executive previously had the wisdom to provide some support to communities as they deal with well-funded lawyers and well-funded developers. And during the recession, it got taken out and it's never come back, and it's time to put it back in the budget. It's not that much money, but it means a lot to the people who live here. And we continue to support the county's community partners, and so you're going to see money here for all the nonprofits that do the work we do. And we are well aware of the value that the nonprofits provide in terms of the county budget. If they were county employees, we would not have a lot of these services. Just would not be possible to do. So I thank the organizations, but I thank the people who choose a life of service, knowing they're not getting the dollars they could get if they went into other jobs, because services is such a high value to them. They're willing to work for a little bit less to know that they're doing more for society. So I just want to acknowledge them and thank them for everything they do. Next, let's see if I do a head gesture like that. So these are the budget pressures, and they're real. We have high inflation. It's not going away, and the cost increases for county services are real: utilities, fuel, and contract increases. The federal funding cliff is real. The federal government's walking away from COVID as if there's no lingering effects of COVID. But we know that all the employment does not come back. You can drive down Rockville Pike and still see empty small businesses. You can go into restaurants with reduced hours and reduced staff. The needs are still real, and they're still there. And so this budget acknowledges that. We continue rental assistance at a level we never did before. We used to talk about a few $1 million we provided for rent. It was very small. It wasn't continuing. We spent tens and tens of millions of dollars on rent subsidy during this, and this budget maintains an investment in providing rental assistance to people. We have increased demands for county services. The needs have not gotten less, they've gotten more. And so we're trying to respond to those increased demands. And we're in a highly competitive labor market. And so it's not unusual. This isn't unique to Montgomery County. Go to any private employer or anybody else. There are people who don't want to be in office at all. There are people who will no longer work for the wages that they were paid before. We know in the nursing profession, for example, there are nurses who would say, I'm quitting today and you can rehire me tomorrow as a traveling nurse and pay me $10,000 a week. That's real. It's not fiction. It's real. Think about the nurses we have, the psychologists, the social workers. We have a lot of professions that are high demand, not relatively high pay, and the ability to fund those positions has been really challenging. I know the school system continues to struggle to fund some of these positions, and we put the money there, but a lot of times it's not enough. And I know if we talk to our HR folks, there are times when we hire somebody, we think we've hired somebody, and we get them all the way through the vetting process, and then we make an offer, and the person says, bye, I'm going someplace else. Start the hiring process again. We need to be at the point where we can pay people what the market determines as pay. That means that we need not to go through a study every time we hire somebody. We've got to acknowledge the market reality is sort of dictated when nobody will walk through the door. There must be a reason they're not walking through the door. And so we've got to be more flexible at that. We'll work with our union partners to come up with ways to make sure that we're not spending 6 months hiring people. And if you are my managers, you know that is not an unusual scene, and 6 months might be short. So we've got to do a better job of that. We've got increased. I've been saying increased. We projected a mild recession, which mildly caused a recession in the revenues we are forecasting. So we would be in a different space had not this mild recession been a reality. And even though our property tax revenues and our income tax revenues were strong, we had a huge hit on recordation and transfer taxes that almost have wiped out. Is that fair to say? The increase in the other parts of our revenue stream. So with our limited revenue stream, the failure of the recordation tax, which is totally the housing market, and thank whoever's responsible for 6% and 7% mortgage rates, they know who they are. This focus obsessively on inflation, regardless of what it does to housing and what it does to employment, is something I do not understand. I'm not going to discuss or debate it here, but as just a human being in this society, I do not understand the wisdom of putting people out of work as an economic strategy to fight inflation. It seems misplaced. And we continue to see, and we know about the loss of learning issues in the public schools. This is real. And COVID was just a huge culprit in doing this. And it plays out differently. I can only speak about my experience as an elementary school teacher. Anybody who teaches elementary school knows this is like so totally hands-on that having had to teach in a period when you couldn't be hands-on meant it was going to have impacts for kids and learning. There was no walking over to somebody's desk and saying, Rich, I can help you with this. It's a simple addition problem. You can't do that Zooming in the Zoom world. And our kids have really suffered for this, and the school system has suffered. So considering, everything we've done, we did a record amount of outreach this time. We had 8 meetings. We did them in Chinese, Spanish. We reached 8 different parts of the community. All the meetings were hybrid, so people could participate from home. You didn't have to come in. County reserve levels. We used to talk about when was the county going to hit 10%. We were going to get dinged for not hitting 10%. We hit 14% this year. There's some people who think we ought to leave it at 14. No, the whole point of getting to 14 was to be able to spend money that was surplus to 14 in order to do things in our budget and to bridge us through a year when we know we're going to go through an extended period of time before housing recovers. When interest rates get down around 5%, people predict the housing market comes back, but they're not expecting any big increase until in housing sales, until the mortgage rates get down at least that low. And so we need to use this money, and we're using this money to help bridge this budget without having to make cuts in order to fund the budget. I'll go back to what I said in the beginning. We make all this progress. We put all this money forward. We say we're going to do X, Y, and Z. Everybody in the community applauds us for doing that. And then we're faced with the choice, do we walk that back? And I'm not willing to walk it back. We've got a recommended surplus in the budget. We're still above 10%. We're recommending 11.4. That leaves $86 million above the 10% reserve budgets, reserve target still in the budget. And we're going to continue to make progress on affordable housing, climate change, transportation through our investments. Next. So, the big nexus of this budget, I'd say the inflection point we face is with the school budget. We talked about the learning loss. You could pick up any newspaper and read all about the learning loss and how people feel about it. The staff challenges that the school system are facing are based on burnout, non-competitive salaries, and staffing shortages, and the inability to fully staff. The meaning that you wind up with more classrooms that are overcrowded, kids not getting the attention they need, and a salary structure which no longer keeps Montgomery County at the top of the competitive pack. And there's a reason to be there other than being at the top is nice, but you could argue how nice it is if that just means the money. What it means is the quality of life of the people you're asking to come here and work. And to be non-competitive in Montgomery County with the highest housing costs in the region is not a smart decision. It keeps people from coming here. And I want to put this in real terms because it really struck me. The other day, Scott Britt and I were talking about a certain project we're getting asked to bring to Montgomery County, and it's got lots of what would be MPDUs. And I looked at the county chart for the lowest people who could get an MPDU. And I looked at the county salaries in teaching, and this is true for a bunch of the rest of our staff. We've been dealing with wage issues across the line. A starting teacher today doesn't qualify for an MPDU. You can't even get in to the subsidized housing we have in Montgomery County. So imagine what that's like for everybody else in Montgomery County, the 50,000 households earning $50,000 or less, spending half or more of their income on housing. Imagine what it means for them. So as a teacher with a college education expected to get a master's and not be able to play in this space is really challenging. The school board has made a request that is not attainable within our means. It's just flat out not possible. A lot of people like to say you've got a $6 billion budget. We do. 3 of it's in the schools. But the other 3 of it, by the time you subtract interest, principal, OPEB, which is employee benefits, retirement, and everything else we have to pay, we've got about $1.3 billion left. And by the time you take out the money that's earmarked, you've got about $1 billion that's left. I challenge anybody to figure out how you cut $300 million out of $1 billion and have much of anything left without getting to the core. You're not going into police and fire. You can't go into the environment. These aren't largely funded departments anyway. You can't go into the libraries or recreation. You know, they're the core of things that people look to as signs that we're delivering things every day. So our ability to go into something else to make this possible simply was not there. And the alternative would have been not to fund these increases, which would have left the school system struggling to recruit, struggling to fill these gaps, and that meant we would have even further challenges. And the school system does not need further challenges. If you saw the scores and the decline in performance, this is not a system that needs to be overloaded with challenges. And I'll be blunt, I said it to my colleagues, that if this had been $300 million for programs, new things to do, I would have said no. But $300 million that is largely to provide salaries to teachers that will at least keep them competitive was something I could not say no to. It's core to the functioning of the system, and I sincerely believe we have to do this. And if anybody wonders, you know, who is the person driving the salary chain in the region now, the District of Columbia just stepped up. Starting pay in D.C. is now $75,000. And by the way, it extends to early childhood workers. And if we had to do the salaries that are envisioned for Kerwin right now, that would add another 130 to our budget. So ponder all those things, because I had to ponder them, and this is not a decision I took lightly. Go to the next one. So we're going to show you 2 slides, and the 2 slides are important. You hear people talk about Montgomery County and when things were better, right? I kind of want to walk away from here with this mic for a second. So you see that gray line up there is all school per pupil expenditures, including county money and federal money, state and federal money. That's the top one. We peaked. Now, this is inflation adjusted, so the real dollars are lower, but we peaked in today's dollars in 2010 at $22,000 a student. We are at $19,500 per student now. So when someone says, you're not the school system you used to be, we're not the county that invested in the school system the way we used to invest in the school system. There is a correlation between not spending money on education and results. I invite anybody to go to the states in the Deep South to see what not spending money on education costs you. On the other line, the blue dotted line, is Montgomery County. Our share peaked, again, adjusted for inflation in 2010, and we were at $15,827. And despite the fact that my administration has sharpened the curve going up, we're at $12,744 as the county share of the spend. So that tells you, in a very clear way, this is not masked by rhetoric or anything else. This is our reality. We are not funding the most precious thing we have. We want to sell our school system to the world as a reason to be here. We want to sell our school system to companies. We want them to come here and know this is a school system that you can count on. If we don't produce results that people are going to count on, people aren't going to come here. This is as essential to economic development as much of what else we do. It may be the most central thing, because if you have a bad reputation as a school system, it may not matter what tax incentives. In fact, if tax incentives or low taxes mattered, the entire industrial base in the United States would be in the Deep South. It's not there for a reason. Even though their taxes are lower, there are a whole bunch of other reasons that created not to be there. We're not that, but we have fallen from where we were. So the efforts that we're trying to make with our budget aren't going to get us all the way back there, but they're going to move us in the right direction. And I wanted to stop now and give Carlos Silvestri and Dr. McKnight a moment to just say a few words about this, because I think it's really important.
Good afternoon, buenas tardes, everyone. I am Carla Silvestre. I'm president of the Board of Education for Montgomery County Public Schools. I am here to express our sincere appreciation to County Executive Marc Elrich for his commitment to our public schools and for including full funding for our schools in this budget being presented today. This is so important because, as he has said, our schools today need our entire support as a community. We just came back from a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic with new challenges and opportunities, and our schools are doing more today for our students and families than ever before. And to do this work, we have built a budget that focuses on the needs of our students. First and foremost, academics, literacy, and mathematics, especially mathematics, because that's what we're seeing the need is the most. This budget invests in fair compensation for our hard-working employees that have given so much over the last few years. And it also helps us with this national staffing shortage so that we can have a highly qualified educator in front of every student. And remember, the blueprint for Maryland's future, Maryland state reform legislation, requires us to increase compensation. And this budget puts us on the right path to meeting that requirement. Finally, this budget invests in well-being and safety because our students must be safe in our schools. And well-being because our students have to be emotionally ready so they can learn to their full potential. And I can tell you that this Board of Education is dedicated to ensuring that these investments work. We are committed going forward to transparency and accountability to you, our families, and our entire community. I want to emphasize that this is a critical time for our schools. I truly believe that the future of Montgomery County depends on how well we do for our students today. En español, el futuro de este condado depende de cómo respondemos hoy mismo a las necesidades de nuestros estudiantes. Now, this county has a long and proud tradition of funding our public schools. Let's come together once again to do that. Our county executive, our county council, our school system, our entire community, to support our schools at this critical time. Unámonos, el Ejecutivo, el Consejo, las escuelas y toda la comunidad para apoyar a nuestros estudiantes en este tiempo tan importante. Now is the time to do whatever it takes to fully fund our schools and to support our students. Our future depends on it. Thank you again, County Executive Marc Elrich, for your leadership. Dr. McKnight.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. So good to see you all. Thank you so much, Mr. Elrich, for your comments this morning and for your support of the school system. For every example that was shared with us this morning, there are real people behind each of the experiences that he spoke about. Real students who come to school every day with challenges, but hope. Real teachers, counselors, principals, supporting services staff who come every day to benefit our children. And what an honor to do so. And so we must acknowledge how important the investment is for them, for us to continue to provide our students with exactly what they need. And one of our best examples came in a little later this morning, but I wanted to acknowledge him, our student member of the board, Mr. Arvin Kim. his leadership in this journey of really engaging in this budget along with our awesome board members from the beginning to the end, constantly put into the front of our work. Who are our students, what are our needs, and how do we get there? And I want to thank them for their commitment and leadership to MCPS always. And we can never do it alone, right? And so we're here joined today with many of our association partners. We have leadership here from MCEA. I see Heather Carroll Fisher. Welcome. Jennifer Martin. Pia Morrison from SEIU. Christine Handy from McCap. Yes. And I called them and called their names because we always have to think about how we deeply personalize the work that we do. And so behind their names are thousands and thousands of people who've made a commitment to support public education. And so how we work on our commitment to making sure they have what they need to support our students has to be at the forefront of what we do. And so today we're all here together in unison, just first of all showing our support for everything that was shared around where we are today. The last few years have been not the merriest, I would say, difficult, but we have learned a lot. We've learned a lot, and I believe that it's important for us to constantly focus on how we've learned from those challenges to become far better than we ever were in the past. And that's what the Board of Education is committed to, and that's what I'm committed to. And as I think about that, I reflect on the county executive's presentation, and I think about this as a parent, and I think about this as a superintendent. Our job is to constantly ask ourselves, what do our students need now, and what decisions do we need to make today that determines what we provide for them in their future? And that is the tenor of our discussion today around the budget. And to our parents and our residents in Montgomery County, I'll say that today, and however the school system is acknowledging this budget really speaks to a down payment on the future for our students. And what does that down payment consist of? The first is that we provide a high quality, high educational experience for every single student, every single one. So that means those who come prepared, those who need support, and those who need us to show them the way. And that is the first priority that we bring. The second is making sure we're continuing to bring forward all the supports to improve math and literacy. And I'm proud to say that, yes, we're seeing trends in Montgomery County that have happened across the nation as a result of COVID-19, but I'm also proud to say that since the beginning of this year, when our children have been in person with the staff, we're already seeing our data results trending in a positive direction. And we must continue that. We also are going to continue to focus on targeted programs. As the county executive said earlier, if we brought forward a budget that was focused on just programs, he would have questions, as he should. But I also know, hearing from our community members, that it is important to have an array of programs provided in our schools that meet the needs of every child's future. All of their aspirations and curiosity must be included in a program that meets their needs. And so we've got to meet that expectation as a school system. And so we're doing that as we continue to build out pre-K programs. Today we have over 4,000 students, 3- and 4-year-olds, in our pre-K programs that we do so well with the Department of Health and Human Services and other partners that help us do this work. And we need to increase that, which is why one of the initiatives was from cradle to career. We want that information and that relationship to begin the moment they become a born resident here in Montgomery County. So when they get to kindergarten, we have less gaps to close. And pre-kindergarten helps us do that. And then we also have to continue to focus on that comprehensive wraparound model for social-emotional support. So our students need us in a way today that they never have before. They've experienced something that none of us in this room experienced as young people. And so we continue to see some of those challenges come up as we recover. And we must be ready to meet that need. And we do that in partnership, again, with the Department of Health and Human Services and so many of our nonprofit organizations and everyone else who sees this need as urgently as we do. And we are committed to meeting that need. And so I'll end by saying, now is not the time to gamble. It's not. Sometimes we could have gotten away with what the investment needs to be. We could have teetered. We cannot do that now. Not if we're looking our young people in their faces and we're seeing some of the challenges and we see the opportunity of where they can go. And so I'm looking forward to us continuing to work with our partners, and thank you so much again, Mr. Elrich, for making sure that you are putting on the forefront the needs of education in Montgomery County today. And I commit to you that I look forward to us continuing to bring to fruition our county being one of the best in the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm showing this slide. I think the purpose is pretty obvious. This budget is going to require a 10-cent tax increase. 10 cents raises us about $220 million, a little north. The school system has a little over $71 million, I think, from the state. The combined money is enough to fund the increases. And the increases, I think, are on the order of 75% of that total. So that's where most of this money is going to wind up going. And other parts of it are staff and other increases that they need to make, but most of it's the salary side. But if you look at the graph, it kind of puts in perspective Montgomery County's tax rate. Montgomery County is the blue dot to the right of Prince George's County at the bottom of the graph. And you can see that Howard County is above our tax rate, or I mean spending per pupil. It's a different slide. This is spending per pupil. Yeah, spending per pupil. So Howard County is above it. Baltimore County is above our spending per pupil. Baltimore City is above our spending per pupil. Anne Arundel County is above our spending per pupil. Montgomery County sits above Prince George's County in terms of spending per pupil in the immediate universe. If we do this increase, our spending per pupil goes to the yellow dot, and that yellow dot leaves us still below Baltimore County and Howard County, and will not take us back. Even that doesn't take us back to where we used to be. So that's just a perspective about where we are compared to other jurisdictions that we compete with in every way, not just for teachers, we compete with for residents. And, you know, if I had my chart up there on taxes, I would tell you that, you know, people say people are going to Howard County and Frederick County, both of whom have higher tax rates than we do. Howard County's property tax rate is $1.25, and Frederick's is $1.06, and we're 99 cents. So again, people aren't fleeing us over the taxes. It's other things that are going on. And we need to do things that they're doing in order to have better success in places like the school system where we need to have better success. Next. So we're going to make greater investments in order to help our children, including be competitive with our salaries with our neighboring jurisdictions. We're going to address special education enrollment, which requires additional staff. And I think people know the special education population continues to grow for reasons I think nobody actually understands, but it's a reality that school systems are dealing with, and they have to deal with it. And this helps to provide more money for teacher assistants. It improves the last piece is the bit about the Maryland Comprehensive Assessment from 2022, where only 31% of MCPS students scored proficient in math, only 53% and proficient in English. That ought to be the motivational slide. You see what other people are doing, and you see what's happening here, and it has actual, I think, consequences. Next slide. So what is this budget? That $3.2 billion is the largest budget in public school history. It's the largest increase ever, $223 million. It's $264 million above maintenance of effort. These are not small numbers. It's $23 million in total funding available for early care and education initiative, which is critically important. If we want to close the gaps, you have to close them early. And the later you intervene, the less effective your money is. I mean, I'm reading a report that came out of Harvard University, and they said that intervening before the age of 3, the return on investment was about $8 per dollar you spend. By the time kids are 8 years old, there is no return on investment. The later you intervene, the less return you get. And if you think about your brain, or if you were in my class, unfortunate enough to have me lecture you about brain development, I would have told you that so much of what you learn and rely on is developed in those first years of growth and development, and your brain hardwires itself. And if it's not hardwired correctly, it becomes harder to add on the pieces later on. So in my mind, it's important to make these investments, and so you'll see money in here for the child care, for supply of seats. We anticipate we should be able to add about 1,000 seats to the system, and we're going forward with workforce training and higher education scholarships to support teacher certification. There's money in here for the Children's Opportunity Fund, and $1.9 million for the Kid Museum, which has been a really good outlet and the kind of experiential learning experience you want to be able to take all kids to in Montgomery County. Next. This budget continues support for individuals and families. It makes critical investments where federal COVID money used to be and is now ending. And so you'll see $6.2 million initial funding for food staples program. That is not where I expect it to end up. We started with 6.2 to see whether employment kicks up, whether more people get back to work and reduce the need for food. But we've got the reserves, as we pointed out earlier, that if after the first quarter we see this staying at the same level, then we can put additional money in it to take care of it for the rest of the year. We've got money, $5.8 million in the budget for potential COVID outbreak and COVID relief. Other jurisdictions aren't doing this at all, but there's still a large portion of the population that cannot get access to either COVID treatments or COVID vaccines, and we want people to continue to test, and we never know which version of COVID is going to show up. Right now, this virus seems to be in a period of becoming a kinder, gentler virus, as Neil Young would say. But on the other hand, this could be a worse virus, and we've seen this thing turn from something where everybody thought we were done to not being done, so we're continuing to do some basic protective measures. The Council and the Executive Branch have created an Office of Food System Resilience. We've got $2 million increase to Montgomery Cares for medical assistance, that we used to pay a lot more of that share of Montgomery Cares operations. We're adding $2 million back into that, and we've got significant increases for the various ethnic health programs, the African American Health Program, Latino Health Initiative, and the Asian American Health Initiative. And there's $750,000 here for the third year of the Guaranteed Income Pilot. And for those of you who don't know, this is the county giving a set amount of money to people to see whether this helps these people move from being dependent on assistance to independence. More support for individuals and families, $20 million through linkages to learning and community youth services program, $12.3 for a 24-hour crisis center, and $14.6 for mental health services delivered at high school wellness centers, $7.4 in additional funds to reshape the county's working family supplement to match a total of 70%. Yes, it'll be down from the 100%. It'll still be the highest in the nation, tied with DC, and one of the reasons we felt we could do this is the minimum wage increase more than makes up for the reduction that families will see from this cut. And that is, after all, the point of wage increases, particularly minimum wage increases, was to move people beyond subsidy. So to the extent that we can do that, this is a good thing. And there's 2% in the county's supplemental pay programs to service providers of developmentally disabled residents and also adult medical and daycare providers. and they also will be getting even more substantial increases from the state. So hopefully that'll close gaps there. Environmental sustainability and climate change, we have record funding for climate change, $272 million in both the operating and capital budgets. We have $10.3 million in Montgomery County Green Bank. I was just talking to somebody 2 days ago who's using some money from the Green Bank to take an affordable housing complex and make it all electric and more affordable for its residents. And that's pretty remarkable because it was a really big complex. We've got money for climate grants. A lot of the money from climate is focused on assistance to businesses, assistance to building owners, whether they're private or public building owners, or private nonprofit building owners, to help them make the transitions in their budgets. So we're putting a lot of money in there, and this is meant to assist people and consult with them so they can figure out what they need to do. And we've got, $750,000 in a tree canopy fund. It has been pointed out that our shrinking tree canopy is certainly one of the more unfriendly environmental measures that the county can be judged by. And we're making enhancement to water quality programs, illicit discharges in particular, and also elimination of pollution, and more money for the Rainscapes grant program. And I think stormwater management's another area where over the years we're going to see a radically different investment, because the stormwater systems that were put in place yesterday, 20, 30 years ago, cannot handle today's storms. And so we're getting more complaints from more neighborhoods about streets that don't drain, water that sits there in dangerous conditions. And the only way that's going to be solved, since we can't reverse climate change, is we're going to have to reverse our pipes. We're going to have to build bigger pipes. And hopefully more greenscaping to get more water intercepted before it hits the pipes. We've got $61 million in the operating budget for Vision Zero traffic, bicyclist, and pedestrian efforts. We maintain our ride-on services at current levels. We had over $300,000 for the Bethesda aging circulator, and a nice little antique thing, but it's going to become electric like everything else. And we've got targeted investments to increase the frequency of inspections for short-span bridges. And you're going to see parking enforcement in some garages now on Saturdays and later in the evening. Next. On affordable housing, we're allocating $124 million to expand the preservation and production of housing, $57 million from Montgomery Housing Initiative, $32 million for affordable housing acquisition and preservation, $4.1 million in federal grants, and $30.2 million for naturally occurring affordable housing capital project. And we've been really fortunate. We just announced being able to acquire a 345-unit apartment complex off of Hewitt Avenue, where if it had been sold, the tenants would not have been able to afford the rent increases. And in the way where this works the best, we had an acquisition last year that paid us back this year, so that money recirculates. So what I like about this program is we enable people to take things off the market so we can secure them, and then we give time to ourselves and the nonprofits to create the funding stream they need in order to take them off the county's hands. If we had to buy and own these things, this money would be gone very quickly. And we've got 18.6 and 16.3 million in two pockets for continuing rental assistance funding, and we've got another $3 million to continue providing overflow shelter in hotels. And this is one thing I'm hoping to come up with a solution to in another way, by building, much as we built the Neville Street shelter, to build a shelter with rooms that looks like, functions like a hotel, where we're not spending a ridiculous amount of money per year. We could easily, if it was our building, the mortgage wouldn't come anywhere near what we're spending per year to house people in hotels. So I'll be asking David to I only say David because he did a rather magical thing of building a shelter. I don't know how many people realize this. Building a shelter, when I suggested the idea, probably in June or July, you're in front with plans by September, and we opened the shelter by March, which would have been December. Yes. That was no small accomplishment in a world where everything here takes 4 years. That's pretty remarkable. We continue to fund the University of Maryland Institute for Health Computing. This is the big project that some of you have been reading about in the North Bethesda, around the North Bethesda Station, in conjunction with the University of Maryland, UMBC, College Park, and the University of Maryland Medical System, and it's to build an institute for health computing. They already have companies that want to locate there with them. They've already expanded, more than doubled what they envisioned, the amount of space they need as interim space until a permanent building gets built. WMATA wants that permanent building on their metro station in North Bethesda, and WMATA has announced they're going forward with soliciting a joint developer to develop that station site, along with Creative Vision for all of North Bethesda White Flint as the next life sciences center in the county. So for people who want to know what we're doing about jobs, we are going after jobs in the lane that is our strength, in a place that's going to be anchored by a major medical research facility through the university that's down the street from NIH, short ride to the Beltway to FDA, has the Cancer Institute to the north and the Henry Jackson Foundation on Democracy Boulevard. So we are in the center of where all this is happening, and this is going to bring over artificial intelligence, machine learning, all those scary things, maybe GPT-4, but all these fun, scary things, but all there to help advance medical research and treatment. And it's going to provide the state with the ability to track a 2.5 million person database where you could look at a person with it's de-identified. Let's be clear about that. It's not people, it's data. And you can see when somebody got sick, you could go backward through their health history and see, are there any indicators that are common with everybody else who got that disease? Are there geographical factors that could have influenced whether a person got a disease? So it's an amazing tool they're going to have, as well as using AI directly for medical research and drug discovery and drug treatment. So it's very exciting. And we've done a couple of really good press conferences. Thank you. It fully funds Montgomery College's budget request, including funding for the East County campus. And we've got $6.4 million in total funding for Montgomery County Economic Development Corp. We have $4 million in total funds for the Economic Development Fund and $2.2 million for WorkSource Montgomery. And 2 additional business liaisons. We're providing more people in the community to work with local businesses. If they have questions about a business they're operating, or they have questions about a business they'd like to get into, we're putting more bodies on the ground to provide those services to people so we can encourage them to open up shop here. And we're funding marketing plan and business development efforts for the White Oak Science Gateway as we continue to look for ways to generate something happening over there. The Public Safety Department, we have a $20,000 hiring bonus for new officers. That matches other people's bonuses. So we're not the highest. And hopefully this will bring more officers here. We're launching a drone as a first responder program as an experiment to see how that works. It's a drone that'll be able to arrive on a scene faster than an officer normally can. If there's someone to be watched or someone to be tracked, that can be done early in a process rather than later in a process. We're doing a police survey platform to collect community feedback. We're advancing the major recommendations from the ELE4A advisory group that made major suggestions on how we improve our department. We've got $500,000 to fund rebates for purchasing security cameras for people in the private sector. And in corrections and rehabilitations, we've got more mental health support, and we've got, we're dealing with budget deficits in the food and pharmacy area, and also hopefully reopening my favorite thing, the bakery. Seriously, we had a really good bakery there. And those folks would go there and they would get hired out into the world as real bakers with earning real money. And it was a victim of the recession. And here's an example of a recession making us make a budget decision that killed something that was actually good for people to restore them to society. So the bakery comes back. And with that, Chief Jones, would you like to come up and say a few things?
So good afternoon. I would like to thank the county executive for the support in this budget for public safety in order to really work towards, again, creating a safer environment here in Montgomery County. And one of the things that we really we had to really look at, and I was so grateful for his leadership in this, is to look at our greatest assets, which are the people who do the work. That is the police officers as well as our professional staff. And to look at their salaries and to look at their benefits and working with their unions. That has been very fruitful for us as well as our executives. And it is very important, as noted, about the $20,000 bonus for our new officers. We are in a very competitive environment in the world of law enforcement, as he's noted about other professions as well. But we would be well behind the 8 ball, you may say, if this is not proposed. And just as a quick example, this was proposed a little over 2 weeks ago, and we're already seeing the fruits of this proposal and this offer. Before, we were receiving probably 1 to 4 applications per day. And these are just the applications. Since we have advertised this bonus, we are now receiving anywhere from 10 to 15 applications per day. So that shows us that there are people who are clearly interested. Montgomery County is a fabulous place to work. It is, again, as we note about other aspects of this budget that relates to training. It is vitally important in the world of training that we receive the best, and we've received those recommendations from our audit. And I am very happy that the county executive has taken those recommendations and moved this forward. And finally, when we talk about technology, where we are in the world of policing in 2023, I've had a vision that we have to utilize technology to the best of our ability to assist with the assets of our personnel, both, again, sworn and professional staff. And this drone pilot program that we're going to start is an example of that, because we've had utilized drones in the recent years, last couple of years, and we've had them to be very fruitful to help us find missing people that walk off and are in our woods. We've been able to, again, find missing children in a more effective and efficient manner. These are the things, and then now we're really looking at this program to be in a more urban environment, to provide, again, quicker responses for our officers, real-time data, real-time information, getting our people to exactly where potential suspects may be going after they've committed some crimes. And as we note, again, there are real concerns about public safety all throughout the county, and perception is reality, and we understand that, and the county executive understands that. And we wanted to make sure that people understand that this is being taken seriously. So, Mr. County Executive, thank you for this budget and the increases along the way, and we look for continued growth here in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to say something that extends, beyond public safety, and I'll talk about fire in a minute. That it should go pretty quickly, but we've continued to deliver services throughout the pandemic, and on the one hand, we can say we've done it with enormous vacancies. On the other hand, we've also done it I would say despite enormous vacancies, but we've done it because we have workforce that, regardless of the department, has worked overtime, has done forced overtime. In some places where corrections, where you cannot leave the place without people who need to be there, we've required people to be there. Our bus operators, when we're not fully staffed, they're continuing to pull the shifts that we need to get out there. So every service we're doing, is being done by people who were asked to do over and above, and were willing to stay around and do that work. And they're also, in all the departments we deal with, facing the same kind of wage pressures. I mean, they've experienced the inflation, so an increase that, that doesn't match inflation reality is a disservice to everybody. And we've got to acknowledge that it particularly hits people hardest at the lowest income levels, or at the lowest parts of the pay scale. 3% on a $40,000 is a whopping, $1,200 a year. 3% on somebody making, $200,000 is $6,000 a year. The person who makes $200,000, they didn't see all their expenses go up and squeeze their budget to the point it wasn't manageable. But in households earning $40,000, $50,000 a year, small increases matched against high inflation is a real challenge for those people. And so I just want to reaffirm that for the police department, but all the other departments in the county government, the folks represented by McGeo and by the firefighters union, all of them have done remarkable work through this. All of them negotiated fair raises that I think reflect the economic reality of both competitiveness and inflation, and that's one reason they're part of this budget. And I'll leave it at that. People can look at the budget and you can see what it means, but I think it's meaningful, and I think we've asked people to do a whole lot that in other places people could have walked away from. The teachers didn't walk away, your aides didn't walk away, our police and fire didn't walk away, inspectors kept doing their job. Everybody did their jobs, and we need to recognize that in the contracts we sign, and we've tried to do that with all the contracts we negotiated. Meanwhile, back at public safety. So fire and rescue, this funding leverages this state emergency services transporter supplement. So we're getting some help from the state. We're adding human resources into the fire department. And we're adding some action coordinator and community risk reduction specialists where, the incident with the fire in Silver Spring is a case where, people didn't know to keep your windows closed and not open a door. And so it's on us now to figure out how do we message this loud enough and clear enough. And those are the kind of things that we need to help the department do, because they're the first responders. It would be nice not to have them responding to such stressful situations. And it also adds mental health and incident stress management for our police and fire departments, because we want to make sure that we're taking care of our employees. We're put in really difficult positions. I can safely say that no matter how hard a job I had, I never confronted things that some of our employees confront every day. And it has to be recognized that it's above and beyond normal. It is not things that most of us have to think about in our lives. But we send people out every day who are going to deal with things that are extraordinarily difficult to deal with. So we're happy to support this. We will work with the unions to make sure the program is the program that it needs to be, because the money's fine and it sets the stage, and we'll plan the programming together. Our libraries are kind of a success story, because once we started hiring up, they were able, for whatever reason, to hire faster than some of the other agencies. We've been able to give them additional money to fill additional positions, because we know they can be filled rather than they're going to sit there vacant. And they've got funds for improving the world language collection and security enhancements for the library. I never thought we'd have to be thinking about security enhancements for a library. It's real. Security is a problem. So It's upon us to do this. And in recreation, and this is also great news, we're going to extend the free in 23 into the next budget. So the use of recreation facilities, except for the pools, is free to everybody. So go enjoy and stay healthy. And I need to find my way over there. Next. Is that it? Yep. Wow. I was looking for the concluding slide. So look, I just want to thank everybody for being here. I hope this gives you a glimpse of what we're doing. I don't want anybody to have a takeaway that the budget increase I put in was something I did easily. I really do think we're at an inflection point. I don't think you can ignore the data. You can't ignore comparative salaries. You can't ignore student spending. And you can't ignore student performance. And so everybody who's nostalgic for the past, we need to treat the system like we did in the past. It has, if you're nostalgic for something, you need to understand how it got the way it was. And if we want, the best in this county, then we have to be willing to pay what it takes to get the best. And I think most of us do. I think most people realize that the success here is our success on the economic development front. The more desirable we are, the more likely we are for people to come here. And over the next month or two, I will be talking about ways of changing how we structure raising money in the county, because the one other takeaway from all this is with the tax structure the county has today, we have very limited places to go. And so everything falls on residents in a disproportionate way than it does in other jurisdictions, where the residents' taxes are supplemented more by taxes on the private sector. And so we need to look at what they do. And for anybody who likes to point their finger across Virginia, I am happy to tell you Virginia's tax story, because it is far higher a burden on the private sector than Montgomery County's is. We're not even close to Northern Virginia. We're not even close to D.C. So I see a scowl back there. D.C.'s property tax on residents is 85 cents. On commercial property, $1.85. Can you imagine what $1.85 tosses into D.C.'s treasury from all that commercial property they have? And I'm at 99 cents. So if we want to be real, let's be real about everything. Thank you all very much. Questions from anybody? Why did they think you're from the press? Yes. Nobody? I knew you would. Okay, what you got? Yeah.
All right. Let me find my list here.
Don't rattle them off. Go one by one.
So my first question, can you confirm this is the third property tax hike in 8 years? Does that sound correct to you?
I can get it for you. The last one.
So the question.
There was a tax hike which goes back to 17, but then the tax rate was reduced every year thereafter. Our tax rate now is lower than it was then.
So the follow-up question to that is, how do you keep people here in the county that are concerned about these property tax increases, or have people come when all they see are taxes going up and up and up?
So part of what I said in the budget, the two prime places people say they're going are Frederick County and Howard, both of which have higher taxes. $1.25 property tax in Howard County. Their values are as high as ours are, and I think they're also at the max of the income tax. So they're not going there for relief. They're not going to Frederick for relief. And if you look at D.C. does a comparison. I would have sworn we've shared this with you before, but we'll share it with you again. D.C. does a comparison of Montgomery County and all surrounding jurisdictions. I can tell you what the result of the comparison was. On residential property, the lowest jurisdiction in taxes is Washington, D.C. because of what I said before, 85 cents in residential, $1.85 on commercial. The second lowest is Montgomery County at 99 cents. All of the Virginia counties are above us. All of the Virginia counties are above us. And many of them will stay above us even with this tax increase. So there's that reality. This is where we rate when you include all taxes. So if people are going to these other jurisdictions because of taxes, somebody sold them a bill of goods, because when they start paying the taxes, they're going to discover that what they were told is not reality. And on commercial taxes, which is my favorite subject, our taxes are the lowest in the entire region. We are the lowest tax jurisdiction on commercial property anywhere around the Beltway. Anywhere. And I will give you the facts to prove it. And they're not my facts. They're produced by the District of Columbia every 2 years, just so they can frame how do we make ourselves more competitive. Obviously, they're not worrying about that on the income, on the property tax. But so if they're going to run to other jurisdictions over taxes, they would come back here over taxes, because we are far from the top.
We're also in an area where people are willing to travel an hour to go to work. Do you have any concerns that people will come to work, but they won't move to the county?
It's a hellacious drive. I mean, people are going to make those decisions. They already make those decisions now, and we know it. And part of it's because our wages aren't good. I mean, you could look at police, fire. I know I've talked to McGeo about some of their workers. They work out of it. Teachers as well. They live out of it. What's your percentage of non-county teachers now? 2/3? Teachers are, because it's not the taxes, it's the house prices. You can't find any place to live around here. I told you that a first-year teacher couldn't even get into an MPDU in Montgomery County. Now, that tells us we have to change our housing program, which I fully intend to do.
And then are you considering now a cap on property tax increases? Will you?
No. I mean, it would be a shame if a society, a county, or any place else defines themselves by the tax rate. In fact, historically, I can't think of a single civilization in human history that defined itself by a tax rate. They defined themselves by what they did, what they accomplished, what they built. That's what people define themselves as. We can manage the taxes if we're more healthy. We can manage the taxes if we bring more higher wage jobs to the county and produce better jobs for them to come to, which are things we're committed to do. I didn't want to do this. I didn't start out and say, give me a budget that makes me do this. But the reality is sometimes you have to do things you don't want to do. And frankly, if we rebalanced our taxes the way I want to rebalance our taxes, I would take the residential rate down. But then I'd have to get state approval to separate the residential rate from the commercial rate.
Two more questions for you. With regard to the 10-cent increase, that's going straight to the schools.
Straight to schools, no
right?
other place.
If you did not do that, what would you have had to cut out?
I would have cut their budget.
But what specifically? What programs?
I would have said I can't go to 10. Because I've already said, I mean, I'm not going to cut the food we're giving people. I'm not going to cut the rental assistance. I'm not going to cut other departments where if they don't get help with wage improvements, they're not going to be able to hire people. I'm not going to step back on the environmental improvements we're making. I mean, what you're saying is I would fund one thing and then I would basically have to take a meat cleaver. Like I said, $300 million out of $1 billion, which is the choices I would have had to make, would have been drastic. I would have left that. I certainly would have done. I would have sent the same budget over to the council. Other people would look at it and see what they think. This is a joint process. I'm sure they'll be looking at this. But I would encourage people to focus on what are you trying to build here? Look at the fact that we used to build more when we paid more for it. We used to do better. And that the jurisdictions that we envy with all the economic growth, they take the bejesus out of the private sector. And they still come there. So if they still come there despite the taxes, what is that saying? It's telling me, and I mentioned this earlier today, you don't get people here because you can't deliver infrastructure. They can build the Silver Line. They can build multiple BRT lines. They can tell people what the downtown's going to look like. We don't have the resources to do any of that. So instead of looking at Virginia and saying jobs, look at Virginia and say, how did I get the jobs? What investments did government make to make it possible to get jobs? That's the question no one around here wants to ask. I won't say no one. I'll ask this question all day long. But if you want to be honest and do a comparison, look at what they've invested to bring the private sector there. Ask somebody on the council like I did, how do you beat Montgomery County? And they give a very honest answer. They said that if a project comes to them, somebody comes to them and wants to build there, or says, I want to be in the D.C. area and I'm thinking about Montgomery County and Fairfax, and you ask this consulting firm if Fairfax County could guarantee that a project on their books could be done in the 2 years that it's supposed to be done in, and could Montgomery County do the same thing, the answer would be Fairfax would do it, Montgomery County couldn't, because there's no money in Montgomery County's budget for these capital projects. That's why we lose. People can pretend about all this other stuff, but the reality is if you can't compete and you don't invest, you lose.
County Executive, I'm getting yelled at here on timing, so one more question here.
He's not yelling.
Can you tell me, this question was asked when the school budget was presented, right? And it was an unprecedented budget at that. Was when it comes to the schools, what evidence is there that more money is going to produce greater results? I'm asking that question again.
So you want to talk about it? I'll just say my quick piece is this money's targeted on salaries, and I know the salaries aren't competitive, which means I know they can't attract people, can't fill voids, and don't get the best of the teachers. You can tell.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Elrich. So a great question, and it's a question that I think is important for our community to constantly have an answer to. When our board president spoke, she said that one thing that we're committed to continuing moving forward is transparency and accountability. So this year, we were very transparent with our community when our students came back the first best year, normal year. We were in person with our students, and we started out by being upfront and sharing where their learning was and where we saw areas of significant growth. And so we continue to share that. At the very beginning of my presentation, I shared that we've already seen some development in our student data from the beginning of the year up until now. I encourage you to look at our board meeting on March 28th, which is where we will be sharing the specifics of the data points that we're using and some of the things that we see contributing to some of that success. But that's what we're going to continue to do. When she said transparency and accountability, Ms. Silvestri said that means that we're often sharing with you how our students are doing. And we're sharing the areas in which we're making progress, and we're sharing the areas in which we have to make growth. And I think that's what our community calls for, and I know that's what we expect to do. We know that's what builds trust and what will continue to have others feel that the investment is well worth it because you know what's happening as a result of it. So that's our commitment.
We have a question.
I just want to add that this is a major topic down in Annapolis, and every county executive is feeling the same way. The word accountability is on everybody's lips, and I'm going to work with the other county executives to come up with things we think need changing in state law to give us more accountability. Because I think it ought to be codified so that everybody understands it's not changed by who's the executive or who's the superintendent. There needs to be a set of regulations to give the counties enough ability to look at things that they can make intelligent decisions about stuff.
We have a question from Kate Ryan from WTOP that's remote.
Hey, thank you very much for taking this. I'm sorry, I'm getting an echo here.
Oh, there you are. Or not.
I wanted to ask about the police budget overall. I know you mentioned the $20,000 bump in salaries, a signing bonus, and that you are already, according to the chief, seeing results. Overall, what's the total budget for public safety, and how will that directly impact concerns about crime that we're seeing right now, particularly violent crime?
I will get you the numbers. I don't know the numbers offhand. But, I mean, our biggest problem is staffing. It's the problem of if I need to throw up more officers into one place, They come from someplace else. We've got to get out of trading places and get to the point that we can adequately staff this department, but they're also getting technology enhancements. If you go to Silver Spring, you'll see technology I never imagined I'd see in Montgomery County, frankly. Cameras to a degree I never imagined, and I don't anticipate that that's going to be abnormal, that it's going to go away. So we're going to continue to make technology enhancements, but our biggest task is to get officers back on the job.
Okay, and follow up on the education question that was asked. In terms of results, Dr. McKnight said we're already seeing results, but didn't say what those results are. Can she give us an example of how an increase in budget actually sees some improvement? You're saying already since the start of the school year, there's some improvement. Can you give us a concrete example?
Yes, thank you, Kate. So the first thing I'll say is when we think about a school system's budget, we have to look at that from a multi-year perspective. Last year, we made a number of investments in the school system that I think we're actually starting to see some of the results now since we've been able to implement with more fidelity with our students being back in school. And so last year, we made some investments. We put in a reading coach in every single one of our elementary schools, knowing that there had been a big impact to early literacy as a result of the pandemic. And so we're starting to see some of the results of that. Yes, I did speak about a specific data point that we're looking at, which is why I said tune in on March 28th, because we're actually going to have a public conversation about that data with our Board of Education. So I again encourage you to tune in. But I also want to share this spring, we're looking forward to sharing an out-facing document with our public, much like we did with COVID-19, where you could see results from different schools and things like that. But it's really going to be focused on academic data and personal learning experiences that we expect for students to have as a profile of a graduate leaving, going through and leaving Montgomery County Public Schools. So those are things that we are going to be doing to continue to show that transparency so that you are able to see the impact of our investment. So Kate, sorry I couldn't be as specific today, but after March 28th, I look forward to being able to do that.
Okay, so not a single example right now.
They got a press conference. Give her a break. You know what press conferences are for. She'd spoil her press conferences, she told you. Board meeting.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from the press?
We can get you the number. I mean, it's very specific. It's like so many hundreds of millions of dollars, down to the dollar. Okay.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice, 3 times. Thank you. I can hand it back over to you.
Thank you all.